Good afternoon, friends, family, loved ones, enemies, contributors, distractors. This is Kevin Lewis on the Blueprint. This week's show is called Beating a Dead Snake. We're going to talk about fears, phobias, and hatred. Condition, fears, phobia, and hatred. So, the first question I want to pose, I want to ask is why do we hate snakes? Most people I know, um, they hate snakes. They're anxious about snakes. They have this, even if they're not all out terrified, they're anxious about snakes. And anybody that knows me knows that I keep snakes as pets. And anyone that knows me on social media know that sometimes they may see me. Of course, like my snakes are captive snakes, raised in captivity. And if there anyone that knows me on social media, especially recently, they know that if I see a snake or something and I think it's in some kind of harm's way or it's actually any animal, I will basically remove it from that place, that danger, a place of potential danger. So sometimes I make a video and when I'm releasing the animal, and it's like last time I had like this probably like 5.5 foot rat snake that I caught. I caught him on the street. He was at night, and people was freaking out like, man, what's wrong with you? You crazy, whatever. But I knew what I was dealing with. I knew what I was doing. I'm not going to see a rattlesnake on the road and try to pick it up. I'm not reckless, I'm not careless, and I'm not uneducated on what I do. But why do we fear snakes? I did some research, and 50% of the world population are anxious about snakes. They're skittish. They don't want to be around snakes. 30% of the American population fear snakes. But only 10 to 15% of snakes are dangerous to people. But yet, we have naturally evolved to fear snakes. This is what science has told us. Even though there's a greater fear of spiders than it is snakes, but spiders and snakes is something that many of us are born fearing. And science says that some of that fear is evolutionary history. That's what they call it. It's the evolutionary history. And that means that we have evolved to fear snakes from being primates, or from primates to our ancestors having a history of being either harmed or killed or the prey of snakes. So we have this evolutionary history, and that has developed the fear of snakes. They say that young children, can identify snakes and spiders before they can identify some other dangers or creatures or whatever. So they believe it's an evolutionary thing. The other reason that they say that we have this fear of snakes, and the thing is, when I meet people, I talk to people, and I see people, I comment with people on social media, and they'd be terrified of snakes, and I say, well, have you ever had any bad experience with a snake? And 9 times out of 10, they'll say no. I'm like, well, why do you have a fear of something that you've never experienced a negative encounter with? Or do you know anyone that has been bitten by snakes, or anything that's died from a snake, or almost died, or had a dangerous experience? And most of the time they'll say no. So what is this fear that we have, this innate fear that we naturally have about snakes? The other thing is perceptual bias. And I'm going to read the definition of perceptual bias for y'all. It says, refers to the distortion or skewing of our perception, often unconsciously, based on our pre-existing beliefs, stereotypes, or experiences. It says it's a type of cognitive bias that impacts how we interpret or make sense of the world around us. That's what perpetual bias is. And they're saying that we have a perpetual bias, a lot of people with snakes. So a perpetual bias could be a distorted perception of something, and it's just unconscious. Something that we don't know why. And this is what I find a lot of people have. And another explanation or theory that science gives us is cultural and societal influences. This, I think, is something that's a little more prevalent um, with people, as far as I'm concerned. And what that is depictions of stories, the media, movies, religion that may influence how we see certain images or things. Now, most of America, this is a Christian nation, and the first story we hear about snakes is Adam and Eve in the Bible, and that's associated with wickedness, evil. And then we have a lot of movies and media that they associate snakes with fear. They imply it. They imply placement. I would say implied placement. Like they will place snakes in a movie to scare you. Like if it's a movie about wickedness or the devil or possession, they will show snakes some kind of way association with the wickedness and the evil in the movie. Or if it's a character that's trying to hide and stay concealed to save their own life, and you see them hiding in the attic or hiding somewhere in a sewer or something, it's always a rat is going to come by them. Or if they're in a tree and it's going to be a snake slither right in front of them, or a spider or something like that. That's going to invoke fear upon a lot of people, and it's a condition or a circumstance where the character needs to um, keep their composure, and they're hiding from something or some murder or something. Then a snake slithers by, and they're holding their mouth, trying not to scream. And even if you don't fear snakes, that's telling you that this is something. Oh my God, this is a tense situation. So it's implied placement and symbolic innuendos that makes a lot of people fear snakes. And what I want to do, I want you to think about, if you fear snakes, why you fear snakes. So if you know people that fear snakes, why do you think they fear snakes? And the blueprint is not about snakes. And if I remember a conversation, it was about witches and association. And what I believe, a lot of ignorance plays a part in the things that we fear. There's a lot of ignorance. There's a lot of superstitions. And I was thinking about a conversation I heard with Neil Tyson DeGrassi, and he was talking about witches and association with witches. And many times when we think as kids, we think of witches and we think of, this triangle hat with the broad brim. I mean, we see that in movies. But why do we think cats? Why do we think a broom? These are two things that if you told a child that's never seen a real witch, or if you think witches really exist, only they're gonna draw a witch riding a broom or a cat somewhere on there when we think of Halloween. Why is that? When I was listening to Neil Tyson DeGrassi describe why witches are associated with cats, and this goes back to the bubonic plague. Sorry, the bubonic plague and what they call Black Death. And this plague was in 1347 to 1351 in Europe, where 30 to 50% of the population died. And the cause of death, or the cause of the plague, the bubonic plague, was fleas. Fleas that were transmitted through rodents, rats, getting in people's houses and biting the people and then infecting them with the plague. So what did this have to do with the witch? Well, at that time, the societal ignorance that was going on, If you think of cultural and social influences, the limits of the intelligence and the deductive reasoning that's flawed in ancient times when they believed in curses and omen and things like this. So if you had a cat lady and or a person that was kept their house clean, she always swept, had a broom and sweeping and things. And this plague was passed by rodents. Cats do what? They eat rodents. They keep rodents away. If you had cats outside your house or your property, they would keep the rodents away from getting inside of your house. Others that didn't own cats, they would have the rats getting into their homes to eat crumbs or getting into their wheat sacks or whatnot. And so they will be the ones more likely to get infested with fleas. Not knowing that this was the cause of the plague, when they would get sick, their family members would get sick and start to die and get ravished by this plague, their community, and you see one group of people or one household that wasn't affected at all, their kids wasn't getting sick. You may have lost a couple of kids to this. This person they're not losing anyone. So you start to point the blame. You start to say, well, when you believe in omens and curses and stuff, you believe that something is causing this darkness and this death to invade my household or invade our town, our community, and you see someone unaffected, and you start to point the finger and say, well, maybe that person is the one that's causing this situation, this wickedness, this evilness. And if that person is causing it and able to put spells, or say if you got into it with your neighbor, and all of a sudden after y'all got into it over something totally oblivious to the situation of causing death, you may say, well, that person put a spell on me. Because if everyone's getting affected and I'm not, and I am and she isn't, her family isn't, then she's the cause of it. She must be a witch. And at those times it was you were guilty until you can prove that you're innocent. And how can you prove to someone that you're not a witch? Especially when everyone that's around that's accusing you is saying, okay, my family members are getting affected. Why haven't you? They're not looking at she has cats or that she's always seen sweeping her porch and sweeping around, keeping a clean atmosphere, environment that rats are not interested in. So then they burn this person at the stake, claim she was a witch. So what did she have? Oh, she had cats. Witches must love cats. And she always was sweeping. That's probably how she got around. They couldn't say, well, she drove a car around. No, she had a broom that she could fly. I mean, this is how things are made up. So now we have witches with brooms and cats because they wasn't getting sick. And they kept a clean household, or a cleaner household than most. So their deductive reasoning was flawed. So my question is, why do we fear snakes? And I remember something, I know my granddad and my dad down here in Texas, my granddad in Texas, he was terrified of snakes. My dad was terrified of snakes. If we were watching TV, and we used to watch the Wild Kingdom, back when there was only one TV in the house and everybody watched the same program. And we'll sit in front of the TV. My dad liked the nature shows. And if they showed a snake, he would jump. And he was still, it's on the TV. It can't get you, and he would crawl up in his chair and be like, releasing a couple of harsh words. And it didn't affect me like that. I looked and I was like, wow. My granddad, when I would come down to visit in Texas, he was terrified of snakes. And I mean, not just scared, but I'm talking about when he saw a rubber snake that he knew was a toy that I had. He would hey, it was and that's a I don't, It's a phobia, and it's called diaphobia. The fear, being terrified of snakes to that extent. And I remember they used to say the only good snake is a dead snake. And I would say, well, it's only a toy. And he was like, I don't care. The only good snake is a dead snake. And that stuck in my mind. I was curious. And my thing is, why didn't that transfer down to me? Why didn't that trickle down to me? Why didn't the evolutionary history of the cultural, social influences trickle down to me? When I saw adults that I respected and loved feared something, why didn't it imprint upon me? Well, one thing is, when I was young, grade school, I used to, by me having a fascination probably with nature, I would go to the library and learn about snakes, the ones that was harmful, the ones that were harmless, how to identify them, where they were, whether they were indigenous to this environment, and what kind of snakes I would come in contact to. So I was educating myself on snakes because I love snakes. I love nature, period. Insects, I did the same thing. Insects, dinosaurs. So what I'm saying is maybe being aware and educated saved me from what has affected my basic ancestors, local ancestors. A lot of my family fears snakes. So I remember one time we used to go fishing up in New York, me and my dad, and sometime my uncle. And I remember as a kid, we went to Tonawanda, New York, Tonawanda Creek, fishing. It was a wooded area, and we kept seeing snakes. And I was enamored. I was like, ooh, I always, as a kid, I was like, I want to keep them. Can I keep them? My dad's like, are you out your damn mind? Basically, probably harsher than that. And we changed fishing spots because we were seeing snakes in the water. We were seeing snakes on the tree. And it was like, man, let's get it over. And we moved to another, like we was packing up to move to another location. And my uncle looked down and like he chuckled. He said, he told my dad, he said, you standing on a snake. My dad is like, don't play with me like that. I don't play. And he's like, okay. He said it calm. And then he's like, okay. So I looked down at my dad's feet and he was standing on a snake. The snake was trying to get from up under his foot. And I remember this vividly. So I was like, you are standing on the snake. And he was like, don't play. And then he looked down and then he jumped and he knocked me back and he had his fishing rod and he just beat the snake to death. Probably broke his fishing rod. It wasn't a big snake. It was probably like, say, like a 12-foot, maybe probably 18-foot snake, garter snake or something like that. And he kept beating it. It was dead and he kept on beating it. I mean, beat it till he was breaking his fishing rod. And in my mind, I'm thinking, what will invoke that much fear or hatred that you would beat it even after it's dead? He beat the snake to death and he's continued to beat a dead snake. Which I was amused by. I mean, I felt bad. I felt bad for the snake, but it was like his reaction was amusing to me. My uncle laughed. I mean, he cracked his side because he said, like, he basically, I told you. But he didn't make it a big deal. He just told him calm. Like, yeah, there's too many snakes around here. He's saying, by the way, you standing on one. Like that. So we didn't think he was actually being honest and true. To beat a snake or beat a dead snake. What type of fear or hatred must you have for that? What condition that fear and hatred that you have? Now I'm gonna jump off, seemingly off course. I'm gonna say, when we watch movies, by the way, like when I watch a movie and they put a snake in there or they put some type of spider, and if you know about the snakes or the spider and you can identify the type of snake, and I'm watching Raiders of the Lost Ark or something like that, and they're hiding or they're doing something, and then you see a boa constrictor. And in my mind, I'm like, those type of snakes are not indigenous to that area. It's just boa constrictors belong in the jungle. They're not going to be crawling around in the desert in this, you know, pyramid type situation. So I'm like, they're doing that. There's placement of fear to make you fear, but it's a harmless snake to you or to the actor. So they're putting a harmless snake there with the actor, and many people that don't know that it's harmless is just see it's a snake. I don't care. I don't care. Any snake is a dangerous snake as far as I'm concerned. So they do this a lot in movies. But if you think about the movie industry, a lot of times when it's us in movies, we die first. And I mean, if you think about why do is it when it's a black character? Most of the time we joke, we say, "Oh, we know they're gonna die quick. They're gonna be the first ones to die or die quick." Well, the first reason that I could think of is we're not intended to be the heroes. We're not intended to be the heroes in these movies, and we have less societal value. Because when it tends to be a bunch of people in the movies or a bunch of potential victims, they have a woman, they may probably a white woman, a blonde, they have a white woman that's a brunette, they may have, they're going to have the minority, they're going to have the fat, sloppy guy, or whatever the presentation of the characters, he's going to go, because it's going to always be the potentially a beautiful woman that's going to be there at the end or the one that everybody can endear to or whatever, and the guy that's going to be the saving, prince or, the handsome guy or whatever. And it's always the black person's going to probably be the first one to go, the black minority. We're going to be the first. But why is that? Now, of course, we're not the heroes and we have less societal value. But another reason is that we're survivors. And historically, we have been survivors as a people. Through all the covert tactics that this government, tactics of annihilation that this government has perpetrated against black people or people of color. And yet we still stand, and we may be in a weakened condition, but after all the things, the poisoning of our generations, whether it's been the alcohol, the malt liquor, the heroin, the crack, everything that has been perpetrated against us, the poison that has been put in our environment, that is meant to not overtly come out and say, well, they're trying to kill us, but to make it like we're killing ourselves. And they're waiting for us to kill ourselves. These are covert tactics. And yet we are still here. So if we are survivors, so if you got a survivor in there, a lot of, like we always say, man, this is not going to happen. The scary movies, we see something paranormal happening, we jet. This is our mentality. I'm not going to be around for this or this person, this axe murderer type things. We're survivors. So if we get killed, that means anyone could die. That's how my perception of it. If we can die, then anyone could die. Of course, where we have less value, nobody cares if the person of color gets killed in a movie. But if we can die, anyone can die. And it's okay. No one's going to say, oh, that person, they're going to be going for the beautiful standard of the person in the standards of beauty of America. The blonde, the brunette can die, especially if she's a little promiscuous, or the one that's promiscuous woman, she can die. They got to show people dying in these type of movies. But they give them value. It's based on a value system. So how can that translate into society? Like I said, if you're educated about a certain species or something, or, spiders and things like this, then you're less likely to fear them or to hate them. If you understand what they do and why they do what they do, then you're less likely to have a fear of them. This is what I submit to you. I want to give a greeting to the people that was able to show up. I know I didn't post a a, um, an advertisement for the show. But Sakine, I appreciate you showing up. She said, Assalamu alaikum. Wa alaikum assalam, sister. I appreciate you. The day Bishop, I appreciate you showing up. So when someone is willing to beat a dead anything, that has a degree of hatred upon it that goes with that. That's a degree of fear that goes with that. So when we're talking about a fear and a hatred to that extent, the mindset of those people that are doing those type of things, if you think about those people, that the mindset of those people that's willing to go through those measures, if you think about how people used to get lynched in this country, and those that were doing the lynching, the things that they would do to that person's body after that person is already dead, the measure that they will go through of dismemberment, taking body parts, those that's called souvenir, taking of souvenirs or trophies, souvenir collecting, that's what that's called. And you think about Nat Turner, after they caught Nat Turner and they lynched him, then they chopped his body up after he was dead. What was the purpose of that? But not just the purpose, what was the mindset of those people that were doing that? What is it that they feared? What was their phobias? What conditioned their fears and their phobias to make it okay that you would go to the extent of dismemberment or burning after the person is dead, after they were died, after they were lynched? If I think about Mary Turner, and she was a wife, her husband was lynched, and she spoke out against them when they were looking for her husband, and they basically lynched her too, when she had nothing to do with the crime they was accusing her husband of. But her grave site, I believe she was pregnant, and they when they was lynching her up, and when I'm saying lynching her, they burnt her alive, and she was latent to her pregnancy, and the baby um, fell to the ground and started crying. This is what the report says. And then the guy came over, they gave his name, and he stomped the baby's head in, and the crowd cheered. And you think about the amount of hate that took for people to not even care about uh, a baby or a pregnant woman that have committed no crimes. What has to be the mindset of those people? And this is not isolated incidents that's done by one person. This is a societal culture that has done this. The people that cheered the stomping of that baby's head. These are numerous incidents that is going on across this country. The evolutionary history of this country that has bred the hatred, the perceptual bias in this country that has made people want to kill and annihilate with hate, with no remorse, to have their kids come and watch. When we see the photos of the lynchings and things like this, they have young kids watching, and they're looking in amazement at this figure hanging off a rope, being burnt alive with his hands behind, or him or her hands behind their head, or placing them in public at the railroad tracks for everyone to see, whether they are a little kid with them or not. It's okay for you to see this. And today, in a supposedly worse type of society, we have all these ratings for movies. Don't let your kids watch this. It's rated R. Parental guidelines is suggested. But without batting an eye, skipping a beat, they had no problem murdering basically people in public and leaving their body to hang for everyone to see. And the stench of the body after time frames. These stories have been prevalent throughout this country. And then after someone has died, like Mary Turner, They desecrate the gravesite. They do the same thing with Emmett Till. They rattle his bullets. Like they rattle his tombstone with bullets. With Fred Hampton, and I believe like with Emmett Till, they have to replace it with a bulletproof um, headstone because this is like a reoccurring thing. 100 years later, and they still riddling his, and he was killed basically for not without committing a crime. What is the mindset, and what is the conditions that create these mindsets? The cultural and social influences that perpetuates this type of mentalities and occurrences. The cultural and societal influences that are not stopping these type of things from happening. That works both ways. So the cultural and social influences must be greater to accept these type of actions than it is to prevent them. So to do all of this, if you had a question, how can you condition a nation to continue fear, hate, phobias? One way, like I figure with my granddad and my dad and their fear and their phobias of a snake, and probably the reason that I will submit to you that I wasn't affected by it because of my education, educating myself, not relying on the education of someone else to influence how I felt as a cultural and societal influence in my household and my family households. Once I go out and I educate myself, then I may have a different perspective. But if you wanted to condition a nation to continue to fear and hate, one method that you would take is make sure that they're not being educated correctly, or that they're not open to learn. And one thing that I will say that racist people do, prejudiced people do, is anything that happens negative with a people will be magnified. And they will make it as if this is how those people are. Fear, hate, whatever, these people. Don't trust these people. I've had a situation here, or they magnify it. Like I said, 10 to 15% of snakes are actually dangerous to humans. But yet people, any snake is a dead snake. Only good snake is a dead snake. That infant that Mary Turner had, it doesn't matter. If you had a snake that you feared and you saw that it had babies, you care less about the babies. You want them to be eradicated and murdered also, or killed, or whatever you want to call it for snakes. So to create or to help perpetuate a condition, you will have to eradicate those things that will condition you to not fall under the ignorance, the superstition, and the curses that some religions may say. Well, this is why that people, any kind of tool that people use, these people are like this because this is how God wanted it to be. He's cursing these people. You're carrying out God's work, just like it is with snakes. They're evil. They're wicked. You heard about the Garden of Eden? You heard what happened with Adam and Eve? That's conditioning. So all snakes are evil and associated with wickedness. All snakes are only good if they're dead, and people have no problem killing them, going out their way to kill them. I seen people that see a snake on the side of the road, they'll swerve over just to hit them. And the mentality. This is what I'm talking about. So, of course, on this show, I'm not here to talk about snakes, really. I'm not here to talk about nature. I'm here to talk about us, a social construct. So, the snakes is basically just a metaphor. The hatred and the phobia, the fear, that's an analogy. And this show is actually an allegory. And we can place all of that where we want or where we think need to be fitted. But that's what I wanted to say. I appreciate everyone that showed up. This is Kevin Lewis on the Blueprint. Hopefully I have a better show for y'all next week. I know I'm cutting this one a little short, but I just wanted to be in and out and say what I need to say, and I appreciate y'all. Thanks. Peace.